Open your fridge right now. Bright light floods across shelves of packaged meat, yogurt, leftover pizza, and fruit shipped from the other side of the planet. To your ancestors, this scene would have looked like an impossible dream. For most of human history, hunger was not a minor inconvenience between meals. It was a living monster that lived inside your belly, clawing at your ribs day and night, making your hands tremble and your mind grow foggy. When the last scrap of food finally disappeared, and the snow kept falling without mercy, some of our ancestors faced the most horrifying decision any human can make. They turned to the only source of meat still available, the bodies of their own dead. And in the darkest, most desperate moments, sometimes even the living, the evidence lies in bones pulled from cold caves. It is raw, methodical, and deeply disturbing. This is not a story invented for shock. This is what survival sometimes demanded when the world tried its hardest to wipe humanity off the map. To understand how such a thing could happen, we must step into the unforgiving world they actually lived in. Imagine 20,000 years ago, during the height of the last ice age. The wind cuts like knives across frozen plains. Snow buries the landscape for months on end. The great migrating herds of mammoths, bison, and reindeer have either moved far away or died out. Your small band of 20 or 30 people has already eaten every edible root you could dig from the frozen ground, every stringy bird you could catch, every last piece of hide boiled into thin soup. The children's bellies are swollen with emptiness. Adults grow weaker with every passing day. Fingers and toes turn black from frostbite. In this world, starvation is not just uncomfortable. It is a slow, screaming torture that ends with your entire group lying stiff and silent on the cave floor. When every other option had vanished, some groups did the unthinkable. They picked up stone tools and turned to the bodies of those who had just died, and occasionally, in the most extreme cases, to those who were still breathing. At Guff's cave in England, dated to around 14,700 years ago, the evidence hits you like a punch to the gut. Researchers found human skulls that had been expertly cleaned with sharp stone blades. The faces were sliced away completely. The base of each skull was removed with careful, deliberate strikes. What remained was shaped into smooth, cup-like vessels ready to hold liquid. Long arm and leg bones were systematically smashed open exactly the same way hunters cracked open reindeer and horse bones for marrow. Cut marks on the bones show flesh was stripped away with practiced, efficient strokes. Someone used their fingers to scoop out the rich, fatty brains. Teeth may have scraped the last bits of tissue from joints. These were not clumsy, frantic cuts made in blind panic. This was skilled, methodical butchery, the same professional technique used on animals day after day. One forearm bone even carried deliberate zigzag carvings made after the meat had been removed. Someone sat there in the firelight, stomach full of human flesh, and took time to decorate what remained. This was not always an act born from total, absolute starvation. Animal bones found at the same site proved that some game was still being brought in, yet they still chose to process human bodies. A single adult human could provide roughly 125,000 calories, enough to give a small, weakening group a few more precious days or weeks of life. In a world where one extra week could mean the difference between the entire band dying out and someone surviving to see spring, those calories mattered more than anything. Similar patterns of butchered human remains have been discovered in caves across Germany, France, Spain, and Croatia. The evidence clusters during the harshest phases of the Ice Age, when extreme cold killed off megafauna and edible plants disappeared under thick ice. When the environment turned into a relentless killer for months or even years, humans sometimes took calories from within their own circle. Picture the scene inside one of those smoky, fire-lit caves. A mother has just died from hunger and cold. Her body is still warm. The group gathers in heavy silence. No one wants to do this. Children are crying softly. The strongest hunters can barely stand upright. Someone finally picks up a stone blade with shaking hands. The first cut across the skin is the hardest. Flesh is sliced away in long strips. Joints are separated. Bones are placed on a rock and smashed repeatedly, crack, 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 until rich yellow marrow begins to ooze out. Brains are carefully scooped from the opened skull. Nothing is wasted. The same hands that once held that woman, cared for her children, and shared food with her in better times now tear her apart, so the rest can live a little longer. The metallic smell of blood mixes with wood smoke. No one speaks much. They eat in grim silence, knowing full well they might be the next one lying on the cold stone floor. This is the visceral, heartbreaking reality behind the archaeological finds. Not bloodthirsty monsters, but ordinary people pushed to the absolute edge of existence. Why did it happen? Because the alternative was total extinction. A band that refused to use every single available calorie would grow too weak to hunt or gather. Predators would smell death on the wind and grow bold. The group would collapse one by one, in tiny hunter-gatherer bands where every adult was needed for protection, hunting, and childcare. Losing even a few members could doom everyone else. When the world stopped providing food for months on end, the brutal math became horrifyingly simple. Use the dead to keep the living breathing. Some evidence suggests it occasionally went further. The weakest or most injured might have been killed to feed the stronger. We will never know every horrific detail of those nights, but the cut marks on the bones do not lie. This was never normal. Everyday behavior. For the vast majority of their existence, ancient humans were remarkably successful at avoiding this fate. They became masters of hunting dangerous megafauna, gathering hundreds of different plants, storing food when possible, and sharing resources according to strict social rules. They developed fire, sophisticated tools, and deep ecological knowledge that allowed them to survive conditions that would kill modern humans within days. Cannibalism was the absolute last card played when every other strategy had already failed. That is what makes the evidence so powerful and disturbing. These were not savage brutes who enjoyed it. They were mothers, fathers, brothers, and sisters who loved each other and were forced into impossible choices by a merciless planet. The physical and emotional cost must have been immense. Even after the immediate hunger was satisfied, the psychological trauma would linger. Some groups likely developed strong taboos against the practice precisely because of how deeply it damaged the spirit of those who survived. Yet in the moment when children were dying in their arms, abstract morality gave way to raw necessity. The drive to keep the next generation alive overpowered everything else. This tension between love and survival sits at the core of what it means to be human. Today we live in an age of ridiculous abundance. Most of us have never experienced true, prolonged starvation. We throw away food that our ancestors would have fought to the death for. This distance makes it easy to feel superior and judge. But judgment misses the deeper truth. Those ancestors who sometimes consumed human flesh did so that someone's child could live to see another spring. Their agonizing choices, no matter how dark, helped carry the unbroken chain of humanity forward to this moment. Every person alive today exists because countless generations refused to simply lie down and die quietly when the world turned against them. The bones in those ancient caves are not merely evidence of horror. They are evidence of love stretched to its absolute breaking point. Love for children who still had a chance, love for the small group that represented the entire future of their bloodline. In the end, survival has never been about glory or perfect morality. It has always been about continuing, about breathing one more day, about seeing one more sunrise, so the story does not end. The fact that we are here, warm, safe, and well-fed, proves they succeeded far more often than they failed. Your ancestors stared directly into the abyss of total annihilation, and sometimes stepped into it to pull the next generation back from the edge. That stubborn, ferocious will to survive flows through every human being alive today. The next time you feel overwhelmed by modern problems or minor discomforts, remember the hands that once smashed open skulls and scooped marrow so you could exist in comfort. Their story is not only one of darkness, it is ultimately one of unbreakable endurance, fierce love, and the raw determination that made us the most resilient species on Earth. We carry their fire, and in times of our own struggle, that fire still burns.